Okay, comparative politics. Let's talk about that election that happened about a week ago now, almost a week ago, and I want to talk about it in terms of sort of a review of what I said in that last snippet about democracy, and then take a look at a few of the aspects of this election in terms of comparative politics. How does the United States compare to other democracies? All right. So first, well, let's start with that. Remember way back when, in this semester, we talked about the difference between a unitary and a federal system. And then there are asymmetrical federal systems, right? So unitary systems are where power is centralized in a national government. And so the national government sets rules for the state, and local municipalities administer those rules as set by the national government. Everybody follows the same rules. In the United States and other federal systems, the federal government is in charge of certain things, and then the regional units, states, provinces, and the like are in charge of a certain set of things, right? And we're pretty familiar with the U.S. system, but in federal systems, there can be. It's certainly not the same as a unitary system. The national government is going to be in charge of a fair amount of things on elections, but there may be, as is the case in the United States, power reserved for the localities. Okay? And we certainly see that in U.S. elections, where a big part of the messiness of the election was the fact that the states have a lot to say about the elections. They're generally in charge of how the elections are administered, right? And so we can really see that in this election. This is one huge aspect of federalism in the United States, where the founders took federalism seriously and held a lot of, or reserved a lot of powers for the states as opposed to the federal government. And so you have 50 different, plus DC, but 50 different states with 50 different set of rules, and we have seen that vividly over the last 5 days. As an extreme example, we still basically don't know anything about Alaska. Have you noticed this? We may, by the time you watch this, but there's only 56% of the vote in, and it's all the in-person stuff because Alaska has a rule that all the mail-in ballots have to be counted basically a week after the election. And of course, this cycle, there was a lot of mail-in ballots. The proportion of mail-in ballots is much higher than normal throughout the country and specifically in Alaska. So normally it's not that big of a deal because most of the votes have been counted, and obviously that's not the case this year. Okay, so that's one thing. Now let's just move over to this concept of the pendulum. I ask you to consider the possibility that the U.S. politics aren't quite as dysfunctional as people think, and that American democracy, American democratic institutions are deceptively strong rather than deceptively weak. And I think we've seen some evidence for that. Closely related is the idea of the pendulum, that if it swings too far in one extreme, it will eventually swing back the other way. And it's hard to tell when that's happening because democracy happens in real time over a long period of time, and it can be extremely frustrating. But the concept of the pendulum is that it will swing. It may look awful and it may feel undemocratic, but eventually that pendulum will swing. So, did we see the pendulum swing? We didn't see the extreme version of it. We didn't see extreme push back in favor of the Democratic Party, but we did see we did see that, right? They picked up one Senate seat, which was fewer than people suspected they might. They actually lost a few House seats, but they did hold the House, and of course they won the presidency. It was pretty close, but they certainly won it. The other thing I want to mention about American elections as compared to the rest of the world, but I think generally this is understood and known, you guys understand this, is it really is exceptional or idiosyncratic, different, unique. This electoral college, the winner of whoever gets the most votes doesn't necessarily win. That's something that you don't see anywhere else. Is the electoral college system great? Were the founding fathers wise? Well, perhaps, but consider this. Is anyone else, any other systems, are they considering creating an electoral college for themselves? Have they decided that the person who gets the most votes is the winner? Have they decided that that's a faulty system? And they're looking to the wisdom of our founding fathers and they might adopt that? No, right? So there's that to consider. The pendulum is closely related to the democratic institutions, the relative strength. I think you can definitely see deceptive strength in democratic institutions in the results that we've seen. It's messy and it's clunky, and Donald Trump almost won elections, almost won re-election, despite his alleged authoritarian tendencies. But look what's happened since then. All the election administrations, the systems for each of those states that I mentioned, those 51 different systems, they seem to work pretty well. It went pretty smoothly. And the president, there was concern that the Supreme Court would rubber stamp any crazy lawsuit that the president made, and so far the president is 0 for 10 in their lawsuits, their attempts to get the counting slowed down or stopped, this and that. So far the courts aren't buying it, and the Supreme Court has not sided in his favor. Essentially, they haven't stepped in and said, hey, we think the president's right. So that's something to consider and think about in sort of terms of this class and what we've been talking about and going forward in your lives as the rest of this election plays out and as this transition occurs. Will this transition be smooth? Will there be a transition? Will Trump concede? Does that matter? All those questions. Think about them in terms of this idea that I've given you over the last couple snippets. Now, we're coming back with non-democracies, which is chapter 6. So, see you then.